Have you been feeling hopeless, helpless, depressed, lost, confused, and lonely? The spiritual awakening journey can be a very lonely one. You may feel like there's no one in your life you can talk to about it. In this video, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I went through in this journey and how I overcame loneliness alone. My name is Michelle Lee, and I help people transform their lives through inner healing and overcoming limiting beliefs and patterns of behavior. The spiritual awakening journey is a lonely but necessary path to uncovering healing, freedom, and purging of limiting beliefs and patterns. We enter this life here on earth as a pure soul, just ready to be loved and give love. Then our environment shapes and programs us. We become identified personalities with traits. Some may be talents that we identify with, and others are gifts. Most of us just become buried in shame, guilt, blame, fear, and trauma. We believe that this is our true self because the people in our lives who we trust most have told us so, either directly or indirectly. Then our experiences reinforce those beliefs. So our internal belief system then matches our external experiences. Our internal world is exhibited and reflected in our outer reality. Being told repeatedly that you're a bad kid will lead to you having the identity and belief as an adult that you are a bad person. This is something that I experienced, and it took me a lot of years and some intense therapy to go through before I was in my mid to late 30s, then being able to realize that I'm actually a good person. From about the age of 14 to 15, when I started realizing the psychology behind everything and understanding why I was behaving the way I was and would be so aggressive and physically assault people, that then I worked on not being that person, because that's not who I actually saw myself as, even though that's what was modeled for me and that's what was reinforced in my home. That's not who I knew myself to be on the inside. That core self inside of me, my pure soul, was fighting its way, trying to come out. However, part of my programming was also that I shouldn't listen to my intuition. So even though my soul and my knowing was trying to tell me that I was a good person, I had a lot of external sources that were reinforcing that I was not a good person. And then I was also told from my environment and society that my ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and opinions were not as valuable as other people, especially males, in my life. Therefore, the unconscious belief that I had and carried with me for most of my life was that I was unimportant and therefore felt unseen. This created a lot of pain and suffering throughout my life, because as that was my internal reality, that also became then reflected externally in most of my relationships. Growing up, I learned how to attempt to cope with my feelings through alcohol. Alcohol abuse was something that I struggled with for a lot of years, on and off. It was always a way to try to numb myself from all of that shame, blame, guilt, fear, and anxiety that I carried with me, and the identities that I had of being a bad person. I was in and out of therapy. I took medication for years to try to manage my symptoms. I exercised on and off for most of my life. I tried yoga. I did do some meditation in the past. I did find it helpful. However, those patterns, even though there was some surface level healing that took place, those patterns really kept resurfacing because I did not rewrite that internally at the time. I was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder with panic attacks. I attended AA on my own and did find some help there and some wonderful people. However, I saw how that just then became the new addiction for people. They had to attend meetings and stay in contact with their sponsor on a daily basis to fight that urge to drink. I did do some inner healing through that process and working the steps, which was very helpful for me at the time. However, I continued to struggle with urges and cravings of wanting to drink, as that was my coping pattern for a lot of years. I spiraled out of control several times in my life. This is something that was a struggle from preteen until just a couple of years ago. It only ended up making me feel worse, all of the drinking, but I had identified myself as an alcoholic. So that was the pattern that kept coming up. It just caused more shame and made me hate myself even more. When I started my spiritual awakening, it was triggered from loss of a relationship, a new relationship that this person had shown me unconditional love. I felt seen and heard for the very first time in my life to the core of my soul. So when that relationship had to end, I went into a very deep, dark place and felt very alone. And I didn't think that I could really talk to many people in my life about it. I did not understand what was happening at first, and I was on a quest to find answers. So I turned to YouTube and also to some names that I had heard working in the therapy community. Brene Brown was the first one, so I decided to look her up. I found her TED Talk about shame and vulnerability. This was huge for me. It created an understanding that I needed to live an authentic life and have the courage to show up and be seen. So in the majority of my life, when I had just tried to hide and not show anybody my true self for fear of being rejected or ridiculed or judged and then eventually abandoned, it became a new aha moment for me to start to figure out who I actually was so that I could show my authentic self to the world. Reading some of Brene Brown's books and listening to her podcast then led me to Glennon Doyle, who I've mentioned before, in her book Untamed. This showed me a lot of different patterns and conditioning that I had been subjected to throughout my life, and just having that awareness is a huge first step to be able to rewrite those and change them at a core level. Brene had talked about feeling all of your feelings, that when you selectively numb or attempt to selectively numb through drugs, alcohol, being a workaholic, or trying to find your approval and worth in other people, any of these means, that when you try to selectively numb the negative or unpleasant emotions, it's impossible. You will also numb all of the positive. So when you're trying to numb shame and guilt and fear, you're also numbing joy and peace and happiness and creativity. I missed those parts of myself that had that creative component. I've always loved to draw and write poetry, paint, do puzzles, just simple things. And I returned to coloring. I just started coloring the adult coloring books that are everywhere now, and listening to these podcasts, and just started to understand myself better, have that awareness of what my limiting beliefs are, and started to rewrite some things. One of Glennon's major messages in her book Untamed was when she had decided to become sober and went to an AA meeting, and someone there told her a very important thing because she thought she was doing everything wrong because she couldn't figure out how to navigate her feelings. And what the person had told her was that she was doing it right, that feelings are for feeling. You have to feel them all. So that's what I decided to do. I needed to feel all of my feelings. I decided to take things one step at a time, and for 1 month, I wasn't going to drink at all. And I just took it as like my full-time job to figure out who I was, how to find myself, and how to show up for myself in this lonely, deep, dark place. YouTube, finding different spiritual teachers as I was seeking answers, listening to podcasts by Brene and Glennon, reading books. One of the spiritual teachers that I was led to is Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And this really allowed me to understand how much I identify with my thoughts. I began to see my thoughts as clouds in the sky. They're just floating by. I don't have to attach to them. I don't have to try to figure them out. I can just watch them float on by. Some would go by quicker, some would hover and try to take root. It was a lot of fighting with my thoughts, but understanding that my thoughts are just illusions that cause pain and keep me in suffering, I was able to have that awareness separate from myself, which means I am not my thoughts. Being able to stay away from alcohol, which suddenly became super easy. I didn't have the cravings and the urges or the desires. I did still have some thoughts pop into my head because it was such a habit for me to drink on a regular basis that the thought would pop into my head, oh, doesn't this sound good? And then I would immediately go to, but then I would be numbing, and I don't want to numb. I just want to feel. I want to feel it all because I want to be able to work through this. Using guided meditations for me was a way to really separate myself from those thoughts. Be able to notice when they would pop up while I was meditating, not judge myself for having thoughts, because we all have thoughts, but be able to just notice that they're thoughts, that they're egoic thoughts, that I don't have to attach to them, and return to what I was focusing on. This worked for me, and it really allowed me to go inside and start to feel whole. Be able to feel love in my heart and in my soul because I am love. And then I could feel this void being filled for the first time in my life, not by a substance, not by another person, not by achieving a goal, but just by being me and by being still. During this time, I have one tree in my yard. It is a huge, at least 100-year-old weeping willow. Beautiful tree. It apparently was rotting on the inside, and these huge limbs started to fall one by one. The first one just in the yard. I can't take care of that on my own. Some of my neighbors, I have wonderful neighbors, offered to help. They did some things to help, but it was still a huge mess. And then the next one fell, it went over the road. Then the third one fell, it fell on the power lines, and it just was so overwhelming. I already felt so alone, and felt like I had so much work to do just on myself, working a full-time job and a part-time job and being a single mom, and taking it upon myself as another full-time job to try to figure myself out. This caused me to spend a lot of time outside, which was very good for me. I've always liked being out in nature. I'm an earth sign. It helps me. This forced me to be outside even more, just cleaning things up. And I really became even more attached to this tree, what was left of it. and was able to listen to podcasts and YouTube videos while I was working in the yard. This became super helpful for me. In Glennon's book, she talks about burning memos, all the memos we've been given of what we're supposed to believe and how we're supposed to act, especially as women. So burning the brush and the debris from this tree was healing. I felt like I was burning those memos and beliefs, those limiting beliefs that I had while I was cleaning up my yard. I was cleaning up my soul. So ultimately, while I found some help and support through books, podcasts, YouTubers, talking a little bit with a couple of my friends who have already started their spiritual awakening and could speak the language that I began to speak, it's an internal journey. It is something that you have to do on your own. You're the only one who can find you, who can return to you, the core you, your soul. It's your soul's journey. And meditation is the way to get there. That's what worked for me the most. And then being able to reflect and journal about that. And then writing affirmations to reprogram the limiting beliefs that were purged. These are the things that helped me. And now I feel this calling that I need to help others on their journey since I felt so alone. And I hope that some of this video was helpful for you. And if there's something more that you would like me to speak on, you can leave me a comment and I'll do my best to respond to that and then cover it in future videos. I have so much that I want to share with you that was helpful for me so that I can help you on your path too. I also wrote a poem about the willow tree, so I'm going to share that in a YouTube short, so check that out. Thank you for liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I can't wait to share more with you about my journey and see if I can be a help to you on yours. Peace and love.